The private jet's cabin gleamed under the harsh Miami sunlight streaming through the portholes, turning the cream leather seats into pools of warm gold. Aisha Montgomery sat quietly in one of them, her simple sundress blending into the luxury like a deliberate camouflage, her dark skin absorbing the light rather than reflecting it. At 39, with close-cropped, natural hair and an unassuming demeanor, she looked nothing like the billionaire CEO she truly was. The founder of Skyline Aviation, a $4.8 billion empire that ferried the world's elite across skies. But today she was undercover, testing the very company she'd built, her worn duffel bag at her feet, hiding the truth of her identity. Captain Daniel Hargrove boarded last, his uniform crisp as fresh linen, his 20 years of flying etched into the lines around his eyes. He stopped dead when he saw her, his face twisting in confusion that quickly curdled into contempt. "Who the hell are you?" he demanded, his voice booming in the confined space like thunder in a bottle. "This is a VIP charter. How did you get on board?" Aisha met his gaze calmly, her boarding pass extended. "I'm Aisha Montgomery. My ticket is valid." Hargrove snatched the paper, scrutinizing it under the cabin's overhead lights that buzzed faintly like distant bees. "Valid? You don't look like you belong here. This jet is for people who can afford it, not some freeloader trying to hitch a ride." The words hung heavy, laced with unspoken bias that Aisha had faced too many times before. She remembered her Detroit roots, the crowded apartment where her single mother juggled 3 jobs, teaching Aisha that success was a ladder climbed one rung at a time, no matter who tried to kick you down. That fire had built her empire, but now it fueled her resolve to expose the rot within. "I paid full fare," Aisha said evenly. "Check the manifest." Hargrove's face reddened, the sunlight highlighting the veins in his neck. "I don't care what the manifest says. You look like trouble. Get off my plane now." The co-pilot, Ethan, a young man with wide eyes and a fresh uniform, hovered in the cockpit doorway, uncertainty flickering across his face like shadows from passing clouds. The flight attendant, Maria, paused mid-prep of the refreshment cart, her hands freezing on a tray of crystal glasses that tinkled softly. "Captain, her ticket scanned," Maria said tentatively, her voice soft but firm. "We can't just—" "Shut up, Maria," Hargrove snapped, turning back to Aisha. "I said get out, or I'll remove you myself." Aisha stood slowly, her duffel in hand, but she didn't move toward the door. "Touch me, and you'll regret it." The slap came swift and brutal, Hargrove's hand connecting with Aisha's cheek in a crack that echoed through the cabin like a gunshot. The force sent her stumbling back into the seat, the sting blooming hot across her skin, tears springing unbidden to her eyes. Not from pain, but from the raw humiliation. The same she'd felt as a kid when teachers assumed she couldn't afford school supplies, or as a young entrepreneur when investors dismissed her pitches because she didn't fit the profile. "You entitled thief," Hargrove bellowed, his breath hot and ragged. "Think you can talk back to me?" "This is my jet," Ethan gasped, stepping forward. "Captain, that's assault. You can't—" "Stay out of it, kid," Hargrove roared, pointing at Maria. "Call security. Get this intruder off before we have real problems." Maria hesitated, her eyes meeting Aisha's with sympathy, the sunlight catching the concern in her expression. She helped Aisha up gently, whispering, "I'm so sorry. This isn't right." Aisha touched her throbbing cheek, tasting blood where her lip had split. The cabin felt smaller, the luxury mocking her as security's footsteps thudded up the stairs. 2 guards entered, their boots leaving faint marks on the carpet, the outside heat wafting in with them. "Ma'am, you need to come with us," the lead guard said, not unkindly but firm. "Check my ticket," Aisha insisted again, her voice steady despite the pain. "It's valid." Hargrove thrust the boarding pass at them. "It's probably fake. Look at her. She doesn't belong on a flight like this." The guards exchanged glances, one pulling out a tablet bathed in the cabin's golden light. "It checks out," Aisha Montgomery confirmed. "I don't care," Hargrove exploded. "As captain, I have authority." "She's a risk. Remove her." Maria interjected again. "Captain, please. She's done nothing wrong." "You want to join her on the unemployment line?" Hargrove threatened, his shadow looming over her in the bright space. Ethan shifted, mumbling, "This is wrong," but did nothing more. Aisha allowed the guards to escort her down the stairs, the tarmac's heat rising to meet her like a wave. Palm trees swayed in the distance, a mocking paradise as she was led to the terminal. But inside, her resolve hardened. This was the discrimination she'd built her company to eradicate, now festering in her own ranks. In the terminal's lounge, with its air-conditioned coolness and wide windows overlooking the airfield, Aisha changed. She shed the sundress for a tailored power suit, applied makeup to cover the welt, and transformed back into the CEO. Her real phone buzzed. Liam, her COO, saw the footage from the jet cams. "Hargrove's done. Board is ready." "Bring them in," Aisha replied, "and make sure Hargrove's crew is there." It's time for the reveal. Headquarters was a short drive away, a towering glass structure reflecting the blue sky like a mirror to the heavens. Employees nodded as she entered, unaware of the storm brewing. The boardroom overlooked the runway, sunlight pouring in as board members gathered, puzzled by the emergency meeting. Hargrove arrived last, striding in with Ethan and Maria, his confidence evaporating when he saw Aisha at the head. "You? How?" "Gentlemen, Maria," Aisha said, her voice like velvet over steel. "Thank you for coming." "Captain Hargrove, do you recognize me?" "You're that troublemaker," he sputtered. "Security." Aisha smiled, activating the screen. Footage played, the slap, his words, the bias laid bare. Gasps filled the room. "I'm Aisha Montgomery," she announced, "founder and CEO of Skyline Aviation. That troublemaker was me, testing our values." The board erupted. Hargrove's face drained of color, the sunlight merciless on his shock. The crack of the slap echoed through the cabin of the Gulfstream G650 private jet, parked on the sunlit tarmac of a private airfield in Miami, where palm trees swayed gently against a cloudless blue sky. Captain Daniel Hargrove, a grizzled veteran pilot with 20 years of experience, had just struck passenger Aisha Montgomery across the face, his hand leaving a red mark on her dark skin as she stumbled back into the leather seat. "You don't belong here, you entitled thief," he bellowed, assuming she'd snuck aboard. "This jet is for VIPs only." Aisha's eyes watered not from pain, but from the humiliation, her simple sundress and lack of makeup part of a deliberate disguise. What Captain Hargrove didn't know, what none of the crew knew, was that Aisha Montgomery was the billionaire owner of the entire airline, worth $4.8 billion, and this intrusion was her test of their character. In exactly 30 minutes, she'd reveal her identity, fire him on the spot, and transform the lives of those who'd shown kindness instead of cruelty, leaving everyone from the co-pilot to the ground staff speechless in the bright daylight of reckoning. If stories like this remind you that true power often hides in plain sight, and that one act of injustice can spark a revolution of change, then you're exactly where you belong. Hit that subscribe button and join the Acts of Depth family, because what Aisha did next after that slap will inspire you to question every assumption and celebrate every underdog victory. Aisha Montgomery had risen from the crowded apartments of Detroit's East Side, where she'd shared a single bedroom with 3 siblings while her mother worked double shifts as a nurse. At 39, with close-cropped, natural hair, and a presence that commanded rooms without effort, she'd built Skyline Aviation from a single charter plane into a fleet of luxury jets serving the world's elite. Her success was hard-won: scholarships to M1T, nights coding flight optimization software while waitressing, and a breakthrough app that revolutionized private air travel. But lately, reports from anonymous employees had troubled her. Discrimination on flights, pilots favoring certain passengers, a culture of entitlement that contradicted the values she'd etched into the company charter. The disguise had been Liam's idea, her trusted COO and childhood friend, who'd seen her through the lean years. "Go undercover on your own jet," he'd suggested during a strategy meeting in her sun-filled office overlooking the Miami skyline. "See what really happens when they think the boss isn't watching." Aisha had agreed, trading her power suits for casual clothes, booking a flight under a fake name as an economy passenger on what was supposed to be a VIP-only charter. The morning of the flight, she'd arrived at the private terminal in a rideshare, carrying a worn duffel bag instead of her usual Louis Vuitton. The ground crew had eyed her suspiciously, one muttering about how she afforded this, but they'd let her board after checking her ticket. The cabin was luxurious, cream leather seats, polished wood accents, fresh orchids in crystal vases that caught the sunlight streaming through the portholes. Captain Hargrove had boarded last, his uniform crisp, his demeanor authoritative. He'd taken one look at Aisha settling into a seat and demanded, "Who are you?" "This flight is chartered for a private party." "I'm Aisha Montgomery," she'd said calmly. "My ticket is valid." He'd scoffed, checking his manifest. "Montgomery? That name's not on my list. You must have snuck on. Get off my plane." "It's not your plane," Aisha had replied, testing him, "and my ticket is paid." That's when he'd lost it, the slap coming swift and unprovoked, his face red with rage at her insolence. The co-pilot, young and wide-eyed, had frozen in the cockpit doorway, while the flight attendant, Maria, had gasped and moved to intervene. "Captain, that's assault," Maria had said, helping Aisha to her feet, the sunlight highlighting the red welt on her cheek. "She's trespassing," Hargrove had barked. "Call security. Get her off before we take off." Aisha had touched her face, the sting sharpening her resolve. This was the rot she'd come to expose, but the real test was just beginning. Maria's gentle touch on Aisha's arm felt like the first genuine kindness of the morning, her uniform's fabric brushing against Aisha's sundress as she guided her to a seat away from Hargrove's glare. The co-pilot, Ethan, hovered uncertainly, his youthful face pale under the cabin's bright overhead lights that mimicked natural sunshine. "Captain, we can't just assault passengers," Ethan said tentatively, his voice cracking slightly. Hargrove wheeled on him. "You want to keep your job, kid?" "She's not a passenger, she's an intruder, probably trying to hitch a free ride. Security's on their way." Aisha sat quietly, her cheek throbbing but her mind clear. This wasn't random cruelty. It was the systemic bias she'd heard whispers about. Pilots like Hargrove who profiled passengers based on appearance, assuming wealth looked a certain way. In her flashbacks to Detroit, she remembered her mother's warnings. "The world will judge you by your skin before your skills, baby girl. Prove them wrong every time." That mantra had driven her to excel, turning discrimination into fuel for her empire. Now, as the owner, she was seeing it firsthand in her own company. Security arrived within minutes, two burly men in uniforms that matched the jet's sleek design, their boots thudding on the carpeted aisle. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us," the lead guard said, not unkindly but firmly. "Check my ticket again," Aisha insisted, handing over her boarding pass. "It's valid. I paid full fare." Hargrove snatched it, examining it under the light. "This could be fake. Look at her. She doesn't belong on a flight like this." Maria stepped forward again. "Captain, her ticket scanned at boarding, and you slapped her. That's not right." "Stay out of this, Maria," Hargrove snapped, "or you'll be looking for new work too." Ethan shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Aisha with sympathy. The guards hesitated, one pulling out a tablet to verify the manifest. "It checks out," he said finally. "Aisha Montgomery, confirmed passenger." Hargrove's face reddened further. "I don't care what the system says. As captain, I have final say. Get her off my jet." The lead guard looked conflicted, the sunlight through the porthole highlighting his uncertainty. "Sir, legally I can refuse any passenger who poses a risk," Hargrove interrupted. "She's a security threat. Look at her bag. Who knows what's in there?" Aisha's duffel contained nothing but clothes and a book, but the accusation hung heavy. This was the escalation she'd feared but needed to document, her phone discreetly recording from her pocket, capturing every word for the board. Maria knelt beside Aisha. "I'm so sorry. This isn't how we do things." But as security moved to escort her out, Aisha stood tall. "Before I go, Captain Hargrove, remember this moment. It will cost you everything." Hargrove laughed dismissively, but Ethan and Maria exchanged worried glances, the cabin's bright interior suddenly feeling charged with impending storm. The tarmac outside the jet shimmered with heat waves rising from the asphalt, distorting the palm trees in the distance like a mirage as Aisha was led down the stairs by security. Her cheeks still burned, but it was the fire of purpose that drove her now. She remembered her first big break, a scholarship interview where a white panel had dismissed her application because girls like you don't usually succeed in tech. That rejection had fueled her creation of Skyline Aviation, turning bias into billions. Now, as the owner, she was facing it again on her own property. Once inside the terminal, a sleek building with floor-to-ceiling windows that let in floods of Florida sunshine, Aisha pulled out her real phone, the one not in her duffel, and called Liam. "It happened," she said simply. "Hargrove slapped me. Get the team ready. I'm coming in as myself." Liam's voice was tight with anger. "He what?" "Aisha, that's assault. We can press charges now." "Not yet," she replied. "I want the full reveal. Have the board assembled in 30 minutes, and make sure Hargrove's crew is there too. Tell them it's an emergency meeting about a security breach." She changed in the terminal's private lounge, swapping her sundress for a tailored power suit in deep navy, her makeup impeccable, her presence transforming from overlooked passenger to commanding CEO. The lounge attendant did a double take but said nothing, the bright space reflecting her renewed determination in its mirrored walls. Back at the jet, Hargrove was still fuming in the cabin, ranting to Ethan and Maria about entitled intruders ruining aviation. The call came over the radio. "Captain Hargrove, report to headquarters immediately with your crew. Security incident requires debrief." Hargrove smirked. "Probably want my statement on that crazy woman. Let's go. Maybe I'll get a commendation for handling it." The headquarters building was a modern marvel of glass and steel, sunlight bouncing off its surfaces as Aisha entered through the executive entrance, her heels clicking on the marble lobby floor. Employees nodded respectfully, unaware of the morning's events. In the boardroom, a sunlit space with panoramic views of the airfield, the board members waited, puzzled by the urgent summons. Hargrove arrived last, striding in with Ethan and Maria trailing behind. His confidence evaporated when he saw Aisha at the head of the table, her cheeks still faintly red. "You? How did you?" "Gentlemen, ladies," Aisha began, her voice steady as sunlight. "Thank you for coming. Captain Hargrove, do you recognize me?" "You're that intruder," he sputtered. "How did you get in here?" Aisha smiled, pressing a button that lowered shades slightly, focusing attention on the screen behind her. "I'm Aisha Montgomery, founder and CEO of Skyline Aviation. That intruder was me, testing our company's values." The room gasped collectively, sunlight filtering through the shades and golden beams that highlighted Hargrove's paling face. The boardroom's digital screen flickered to life, displaying crystal-clear footage from the jet's hidden cameras, the sunlight through the partially shaded windows casting a warm glow on the shocked faces around the table. Hargrove watched himself slap Aisha, his recorded voice booming, "You don't belong here." Board members murmured in horror, one whispering, "That's assault on the CEO." Aisha stood tall, her voice cutting through the tension. "This test wasn't random. We've had reports of discrimination on our flights. Passengers profiled based on race, class, appearance. I needed to see it myself. Captain Hargrove, your actions confirm the worst." Hargrove stammered, sweat beading on his forehead despite the air-conditioned room. I thought you were trespassing. You didn't look like you belonged on a private jet." "Didn't look like it?" Aisha echoed. "Because I'm black? Because I wasn't in designer clothes? That's the problem. Your assumptions turned violent." Ethan shifted uncomfortably, the light catching his guilty expression. "Ma'am, I should have stopped him." Maria nodded vigorously. "I tried to help. This isn't who we are." Aisha turned to them. "Maria, your kindness didn't go unnoticed. Ethan, your hesitation speaks to a conscience, but silence enables abuse." She addressed the board. "Hargrove is terminated immediately, without severance. We'll press charges for assault." Hargrove exploded. "You can't do this! I've flown for this company for 15 years. One mistake." "One slap," Aisha corrected, exposing a pattern. "Your flight logs show multiple incidents of passenger mistreatment, all overlooked because you get results. No more." As security escorted Hargrove out, protesting loudly, Aisha revealed the broader changes. mandatory bias training for all staff, diversity hiring initiatives, and a new policy where she or undercover auditors would randomly join flights. Skyline Aviation will lead by example, she declared, the room's light reflecting her unyielding resolve. Maria approached afterward, the boardroom emptying. Ms. Montgomery, thank you for seeing me. I have 2 kids. This job means everything. You'll keep it, Aisha said. In fact, I'm promoting you to head attendant trainer. Teach others the compassion you showed. Ethan received a warning but kept his position, tasked with developing a pilot mentorship program focused on ethics. The airfield outside buzzed with activity, jets taking off into the bright sky as Aisha watched from the window, her cheeks mark fading, but the lesson enduring. The company-wide meeting the next morning took place in the headquarters atrium, sunlight flooding through the glass ceiling and illuminating rows of employees seated on temporary chairs. Aisha stood at the podium, no longer in disguise, her power suit a symbol of reclaimed authority. The slaps footage played on a large screen, gasps rippling through the crowd as they witnessed Hargrove's actions. This isn't just about one incident, Aisha said, her voice echoing in the vast space. It's about the culture we've allowed. Discrimination has no place here. From today, we rebuild with integrity. She announced scholarships for underrepresented youth in aviation, partnerships with civil rights organizations, and anonymous reporting lines for bias. Employees applauded, many approaching afterward with stories of their own encounters, the atrium's light fostering an atmosphere of openness. Maria thrived in her new role, training crews with empathy-focused simulations. Ethan mentored young pilots, emphasizing ethical decision-making. The company not only recovered, but soared. Stock prices rose 15% as news of the reform spread, attracting diverse talent and clients who valued principle over profit. Aisha's personal triumph came during a quiet lunch with her team in the sun-drenched cafeteria. Liam raised a glass. To the boss who leads from the front and takes the hits to make us better. Months later, on a bright tarmac similar to the one where it began, Aisha boarded a jet not as a test, but as herself, Maria now.